Do you have any questions for me or just preparing?
I'm just prepared. I don't know if what I think to talk is adequate, but I hope it is.
Yeah, it will be good. Thanks.
5 minutes. It's short.
Yeah.
Hi, Nathan and Camila.
Hey, Night.
Hi.
So I'm just trying to get situated.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Raquel.
How are
Hi.
you?
Good. How are you?
I'm trying to do all the things at the same time, connecting people, solving problems, but I think it's great. The event's going so well.
It is a lot of good messages and great discussions happening.
Yes. Sometimes we want to see more than one side event, and so we don't have time to do all the things at the same time.
So I think I'll plan to start recording right around 7 minutes from now, around the official starting time. And any other questions about the order or agenda?
Did you solve the question of the YouTube transmission? When you start recording, it will be live on YouTube. Okay. But it's already live in YouTube?
Yeah. And what Bruno said is that it's okay just to do it to my channel.
Okay.
It's a little bit more technical. I've never done like inputting the numbers and whatnot, but he said that's okay.
Okay. So we have a waiting room, or people that are connecting, they will connect and
Yeah,
go on. You suspend the registration, yes?
yeah, I suspended the registration and I don't have a waiting room, so they should just come and go.
Okay.
Nathan, do you know, maybe you said this before I got on, is Vidas joining us?
Well, I
Hopefully.
don't know. He might. I'm not sure.
And
He had registered
okay.
for it.
No,
But
does Raquel know if Tatiana is able to join us or? Don't know. Okay.
She didn't tell me anything, but I can ask her here.
So just to verify with the introductions, we're just going to go in the same order as we have in the agenda to do, because we're doing the welcome in the various languages.
and I'm wondering if we don't have a few more people at 11, if we wait until, or sorry, 3 p.m. Brazil time, just because if it's just us, then I think we could wait until we get some people.
We can start about 3 o'clock, wait some 1 or 2 minutes, but we can talk about our ideas and sharing. Maybe someone decide to stay with us and see what is happening. Because YouTube is playing. Yes, I went there to check, and YouTube is playing. Maybe, I don't know how we can see if the people are in.
It shows me 2 are watching now, so I I can see the numbers, probably because it's on my channel.
Okay.
Just to check if I
Some
get it,
people.
the introduction would be each one do yourself, your own introduction, and in your own in your native language. Is that?
I think it's better in English. And then
Everything in English, okay.
few words in Portuguese if you want.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. Happy to see you. We're planning to get started in a few minutes. We're not yet to the official starting time, and we'll probably wait a little bit to see if more people join in. And we're going to start with introductions for the presenters. But for all of the participants, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, that would be great as well. And we look forward to learning from you after we share some initial information. Thanks again. Welcome, everyone. So we are officially at the starting time, and we're recording for reference later, and we also have a live stream on YouTube. And if you would like to share with anyone who couldn't join on Zoom, that will be an option to refer them to the YouTube streaming site as well. We're going to start with introductions of the presenters, and we'll also introduce ourselves in mother tongue or native language so that we embody the diversity, which is going to be a major theme for our presentation today. So I'll go ahead and start with introductions. My name is Nathan Utman. I'm a physician currently living in California in the United States, and I'm really excited to connect and learn together. Ninaitwa Nathan, Ninaishi, Jimbo la California. Karibuni sana. Nightingale, go ahead.
Thank you, Nathan. So my name is Nightingale, and I am a registered nurse, currently working in the cardiology unit or in the cardiac unit. I'm also a mother of 2 young children who have very much been an inspiration for me. They're 6 and 9. And I'm very glad to be here, both as a person who currently is living in the US, but also who grew up in Kenya, in rural Kenya. Na koguo nĩ ngũcokia ngatho nyingĩ mũno nĩ ũndũ wa gũkorwo handũ haha. Nĩ ndĩraigua njiganĩire na ngaigua ngenete nĩ gũkorwo hamwe na inyuĩ. Mwĩ karibu mũno mĩario-inĩ ĩno. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Raquel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raquel Santiago. I am from Brazil. I am a professor at university in School of Nutrition. So I am a nutritionist and a gastronomy. And I am mother of 2 teenagers. And I work with biodiversity for food and nutrition. And want to talk with all of you about diversity, acknowledgement, and food with this group. Então, meu nome é Raquel Santiago, eu sou brasileira, professora da Universidade Federal de Goiás, nutricionista e gastrônoma, e estou aqui para conversar um pouco com vocês sobre biodiversidade, alimentação e nutrição. E agora eu vou convidar Camila. Please introduce yourself.
So hello, my name is Camila Castro. I'm also a nutritionist. I'm a master's student at Federal University of Goiás. I work with the National Feeding School program here, and I'm pleased that I'm able to be here today. Então, eu sou Camila, sou brasileira também, aqui de Goiás, e eu estou muito feliz de estar participando hoje. Espero contribuir um pouco com a minha experiência sobre o Programa Nacional de Alimentação Escolar. Thanks.
And
So,
now you, okay, invite someone.
Tatiana, can you introduce yourself, please?
Tatiana is not here, I think. So Laura, maybe.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Hansen. I'm in Portland, Oregon, in the US. I have kind of 2 roles. I work for the local government doing planning, preparedness for natural disasters. And then I also do functional nutrition work. So I bring both of those lenses to this conversation. Y también hablo español, entonces voy a presentarme también en mi otro idioma. Yo soy Laura y estoy aquí en Portland, Oregon. Yo vengo a este trabajo con 2 perspectivas. Yo durante el día trabajo por el gobierno en emergencias, más o menos. Estamos preparándonos para una emergencia aquí. Y también estoy trabajando como nuevamente en nutrición también. Entonces tengo estas dos perspectivas cuando hablamos de la salud planetaria. Gracias por estar con nosotros. I'm going to pass it to Vedast.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Vedas Nyonsawa. I'm originally from Rwanda, living now in the Netherlands. I'm studying at Wageningen University and Research and working as Forest and Nature Conservation Program Committee member, but as well as involved in different nature and indigenous rights initiatives. Yeah. So nitwa Vedaste Niyonsaba, nturuka mu Rwanda, nkaba niga muri Wageningen University ibijyanye no kubungabunga environment, nkaba ndi umumambure muri komite ya porogaramu y'amashyamba no kubungabunga ibidukikije muri iyo kaminuza, kandi nanone nkaba ndi mu mishinga myinshi itandukanye iharanira uburenganzira bw'imiryango iciriritse ndetse no kubungabunga ibidukikije. Murakoze. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm not okay. I pass the floor to Amanda. Christe.
So we want now to have you as our guests to introduce yourself and share with us your fields and what are you doing. As Vedas said, if Amanda should present herself, it will be great. Amanda, we are not listening you if you start talking. I don't know if your mic is closed. Amanda, I think that you have to open your mic.
Oh, Amanda says her mic is not, her audio isn't working. So
okay. If you can write in the chat, please. And if while we wait for Amanda, if Anna should introduce herself.
Hola, bom dia, hello. Thank you for this space. Thank you for all of you for creating this beautiful space. I'm calling from Syracuse, New York, where I grew up, but my current home base is in Uruguay, where I work with the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research, which is an intergovernmental organization, and we work with 19 countries in the Americas to support global change science, to support policy. And my background is in ecology, but looking mostly at infectious diseases and climate-sensitive diseases. And I'm also Ecuadorian and US citizen. So, muchísimas gracias por la oportunidad de participar en esta conversación y voy a pasar la voz a la siguiente persona. Gracias.
So, John, should you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, good evening. I'm John Amersfold. I'm from Exeter in the UK, South Coast UK. I'm currently working with public health in Devon, and I'm trying to develop a portfolio which I'm badging as planetary health, and trying to combine my qualifications around public health and also previous qualifications in climate change. And working with partners, planners, and we're particularly looking at the moment around the equity that has really been sort of part of the pandemic and how we can use what we've learned and really push that agenda.
Thank you, John. Andrew?
Everyone, I here in Lower Mainland of British Columbia in Canada, and I am working as a nature and forest therapy guide. Yeah, and really just focusing on restoring my own relationship to the land and finding healing there, and yeah, apprenticing in terms of learning from the land as well of that question of what the more than human world needs during this time. So thanks for this space. Good to be here.
Thank you and welcome. So, David? I don't know if this is the right pronunciation, but David.
Yes, it's correct. So I'm Davide from Belgium. I'm a social psychologist working for Humanity and Inclusion, the new name of Handicap International, a French NGO committed for inclusion and health and rehabilitation. And yeah, I say connecting from Europe. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Marcel, please, should you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm Marcel. I'm currently a doctor. I'm a resident at a family medicine program in Juazeiro, in Bahia. And I really want to learn from all of you guys. That's pretty much all of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcel, and welcome. Well, I think everybody introduced itself, and we are very glad to have you here. And so, Nathan or Laura?
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Raquel. I'll kick us off with a semi-formal, we can call it as minimally formal as possible, just because we want to have an intimate setting, but we also want to tell our new friends more about what led to us coming together. And then we look forward to hearing much more from you, both about what you're doing, your thoughts about what we can do together, and how we can build this idea about planetary friendship and blending academic theory with integrative practice, really applying the ideas of planetary health in our relationships and how we connect to each other and to the more than human world and our shared home on planet Earth. So we want to just start off by telling a little bit about how we came together. So at the previous Planetary Health annual meeting in 2019 that was at Stanford, a small group of us, including Laura and Nightingale, and a few others, met outside during the time whenever the conference was ongoing, and we shared some of our ideas, some of our interests and background, and really that we have a strong interest in place and stories and people and the roots of these ideas about what planetary health means. We really share a perspective that's as much as what we are talking about and innovating, co-creating a new discipline, a new field, a new approach of planetary health, that's authentically, this approach has true roots in the natural world and in indigenous worldviews. And so we said, what would it be like if future planetary health conferences were direct and explicit about making space for people who share this interest? And it's true that it's not everyone. There are still many people who are academically inclined, and much of the modern world actually incentivizes and directs us to think more narrowly, to think short term, and to focus on human beings, short-term needs and priorities. But we thought, what would it look like if, for example, we had just heard that the next annual meeting would be held in Brazil? So we started dreaming and talking and sharing and saying, what would it be like if we could go earlier and connect to the people from the place, learn the stories of the place, and really build deep relationships and connections that are not just short term, where you go to a place, you listen to some people talk, you make some new connections, and then you go back home mostly to be largely unchanged. And so we're intentional about this idea that each relationship, each connection can fundamentally change us for the better whenever we powerfully connect, when we have that vulnerability about being truly human and sharing who we really are. And so that conversation led to continued conversations as we shared ideas of what next steps might look like and how that might play out. And we connected with several friends from Brazil and have been meeting periodically to share ideas about what other groups have a similar model and how we might actually be able to sustain these interests and this relationships and operationalize this model of what it looks like to not just talk about planetary health externally, but also internally and very much directly in how we relate to each other. And so we have a poster, we have this panel, and we have an event on Thursday where we're going to present about food as a very specific opportunity that is universal to all human beings, that all of us need food. And so we welcome you to check out that event at the festival. It's called A Momento to Cook. And we'll share videos from across the world about our friends and community members and what they have to share. And so those are a few of the spaces that we have basically as seeds to start and continue conversations. But truly, we are wanting to connect with you, learn about your interests, learn what organizations and models you're familiar with, so that this can be a seed that is just the beginning. And I'll end with a quote by Maya Angelou, who's a famous writer from the United States. And she says that she's learned that people will forget what you say. People will forget what you do, but people will never forget how you make them feel. And that is what we want you to feel, is despite connecting across distance and time in this virtual space, that truly this is a space for friendship, for common humanity, and even solidarity, friendship, and love with all of our relations in both the human world and the more than human world. So I'll invite the next presenter to come in, and thank you all for joining us.
So I will start talking a little bit about my experience at the National Feeding School program. So what I can bring as our program is one of the best in the world. So it's an example, a model to other countries that's really good, because we live too much things and see that there are things that works too good. As the world happens to become to us as model, we also have things that going outside as a model for them. And I need to share some things about the program and give perspective, a panorama of the program, so it's going to be easier to understand what I want to share at the end. So our program is suffering some attacks through projects of loss that configure the program as it should be. So there is guidelines to predict how it should be, and that guidelines are lined up with other public policies, programs that focus on universality and equity, respect to other regional actors, human rights to adequate and health food, and other things. So it is a way that we find to face our health epidemic scenario locally. So when I say about epidemic scenario, I mean disease that is connected to food and nutrition, so obesity, diabetes, this kind of thing. And even with all these problems, we still working and maintaining the program on. So as the public calamity was proclaimed, came a decree that allow us to continue executing the program with some adaptations. So since April, we are able to give students, families a care with food that includes fruits and vegetables. That's an important part because the recommendation is to keep the acquisition of food from family farming as in the law of the program. And when you talk about acquisition of food in this program, well, we need to emphasize that there is some rules to follow. So there are from the resources that came to the municipal, state, or federal management, they need to invest this 30% of this in family farming. So this is a way to promote food security, not just for students, but also to the family farmers. And this is criteria to choose from who they will buy. So these criteria involve if the family farmer or cooperative is local, if they are from a vulnerable group, and vulnerable group here includes if they are from indigenous, quilombola communities, or I guess it's land reform settlement too. And the last one is if they produce food in agroecological or organic way. So those are important aspects that show how the program is important now, even now, more now in pandemic situation that we're living, to promote this. And this work that with National Feeding School program leads me to be here now, because it involves me with food systems and this kind of topic of discussion. And I would like to highlight another example that is of interinstitutional agroecological fair that happens here in the university. So it was born from a partnership between two education institutes. So it gave not just more marketplace for them, but it facilitated access for the university public. So the students, the ones who work in the university, the people who live around the university, and also they also work with education about the path of the food until our table with all the ones that are involved. So this approximate the people who buy to the farmers. So it make the chain of system food shorter. It approximate us and make us see how it's important to deal with those aspects that all the event is working with, that is climate change, food systems, how we can, even with little things we do day by day, impact on health, not health, but planet health. So it's a little abrangent, but it's a little broad what I bring here, but I guess I hope I did it like it's supposed to be. Thanks.
Thanks, Camila. It's so good to hear more details about what you've been working on. So I'll go next and just share from my background. Like I said before, I do work with emergency management, disaster preparedness response, but I also work on nutrition side. So I bring both of those perspectives to this conversation. And I worked internationally for a long time. So I've worked with communities throughout Asia and Latin America, especially. And I just, through that experience, 12 years or so working with a variety of different communities, I came to really recognize that while there are some answers for things that we have through modern science or academia, there's a lot of things that we need to be humble to learn from people who live in different contexts and who perhaps have been stewards of knowledge or wisdom that's been passed down for many generations that we've lost, speaking for myself. So that's like really lit a passion in me. when I look at the issues facing the globe today, I really feel like there is a lot of power in these connections that we can create and the friendships that we can create and the opportunity and the space that gives us to learn from one another and to share the best of what we know, and really expand the way we define both the problems and the potential solutions to our problems. I think it was at the last Planetary Health meeting where we talked about, oftentimes the tools you were using that created the issue are not the same tools you need to use to solve the issue. So I'm really excited about the way that this conversation has evolved with this group of friends to talk about what is, so much we can learn and contribute through academia or through mainstream science, but there's so much wealth of knowledge that is beyond that. And so tapping into that and trying to bridge those gaps as well. And when I'm having heard who's on the call today, I'm confident there's a lot of people working in that space. I just wanted to also highlight, when we heard the keynote speaker yesterday, it really resonated for me that this group, this friendship team you're hearing from, are really interested in that point that Dr. Kimmerer said about, there's a path that's going 2 directions in the future. And it's our choice. Which of those 2 paths do we want to get on? And we're already down the path, let's say the more negative path to some extent. And we want to get over onto this path. And in order to do so, we need to go back and reclaim some of what we've lost. That really had me pause for a minute and think about, how do we do that? How do we go back? How do we recover some of what we've lost and help us to get on to this other path that we want to be on? She also spoke about how we're the people of the 7th fire. And when we talk about this great transition, trying to transition to being people of the 8th fire. And the way she defined that was friendship and peace. And so that gave me a lot of hope, because this group that's been meeting, who you're hearing from, we've been meeting for most of this past year on and off to just explore the power of friendship for this transition and how to collaborate together in that sense of kindness and trust and sharing. And like Nathan was saying, not something short, not a quick presentation, but a real meaningful exchange that grows over time. And as that trust grows, the depth of what resource we can share with each other also grows. One of our key members from the group is not with us today because he's a doctor in Iguazu Falls area down in Brazil, and he had to go meet with someone in the health secretary. But he shared with us earlier today when we had our poster session, he was sharing with us, that he at least is still holding the hope that even though COVID disrupted this Brazil meeting and the original intention that we had for an in-person exchange, an opportunity to bring friends together, meet with a local community, and really explore planetary health on the ground, even though that got disrupted right now, he still holds out a lot of hope that as a group, we can move forward to find ways for that kind of in-person exchange once it's safe to do so. And so, really placing planetary health, maybe we would do some kind of future trips or expeditions, is how he calls it, and provide an opportunity for volunteering with a spirit of creating, co-creating this capacity. What do we have, like myself or others on this call, what skills and expertise do we have that we can share? And then what can we also learn and provide a platform for other communities or other countries, other places and ways of being and knowing. We feel this is really critical and necessary for the problems we have to face. So I just want to share that with you since he's not here, that I think there's still a lot of interest within this group to move ourselves forward toward some kind of in-person exchange, in addition to the things we can do virtually and online. And I'm going to pass it over to Nightingale.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the great insights from the people that have spoken before me. And really, in a lot of ways, that's what we call wisdom. And if we were living in an indigenous community or if we were looking from the outside to us, we would probably call that indigenous wisdom. So I just want to come in with a humble thought that has dwelled in me for a while, that we are all deeply, deep within us, indigenous, because we didn't just happen to be where we are now. We came from somewhere. We're deeply connected to some roots somewhere, and I know Nathan mentioned about roots. And so it is finding that space, just like Laura mentioned about us finding, if we realize that we have actually started walking down the path that we are not meant to go, the path that doesn't bring healing and friendship and love, that just focuses on individuality, then it is fine and it is best for us to turn around and take that walk back. And so we have the indigenous people that have been stewards for a long time, those who are fortunate to be still connected to the indigeneity. And so that's very much also connected to the reasons why, at least I was very excited to go to Brazil, to see how the indigenous people live and what I can learn personally from them. I was born and raised in Kenya, and grew up in a very rural place, but it still wasn't as rural enough as I sometimes wish it was in a lot of ways. And that trip back in time, excuse me. So that trip back in time would be a great trip for me, and especially even through watching my now 6 and 9-year-old children who actually have lots of questions. So we are living in the US, but they have very many questions about my life growing up in Kenya. And they have dreams of their own, but they also have their own indigeneity. Whenever I watch them outside as they play, as they interact with the natural space, I do miss myself a lot being in that age. And I get reminded a lot of the time that you can grow bigger, but you don't have to lose that connection to the natural space. Please wait. You don't have to lose that connection to the natural space. And so for me, it's a constant reminder, it's a constant lesson to take a step back, to take a pause and look to see the mistakes that I have made and accept those mistakes, and then find ways to move forward through learning. I also think about, in the current world that we're in right now, there's so many great things that are happening, but there's also a lot of unsettledness, if I can use that word, just feeling unsettled for many different reasons. And healing is a word that comes to me, that we all would benefit from healing. And it is through that healing that we can find opportunities for forgiveness, for me to forgive you and for you to forgive me for things that may have been done by others connected to me, or for things that I have done knowingly and unknowingly. So as a Black person, and even as a woman, I have been in spaces where there's a lot of friction, but I also know that it doesn't have to be that way. And so it is for us to search and see, how can we heal these spaces? How can we, instead of teaching each other lessons, you know, like if you've hurt me, if you've stepped on my toe, I don't have to step on your toe. I can let you know you stepped on me. I can even scream if that works for me, but I don't have to step back on you. And it takes a lot of self-understanding, I think, and a lot of strength to not step back, because I think most of the times it's the default is to hey, you kicked me and I kick you back. So I hope I'm not talking in too many words and not getting to the point, but it's just saying that in this space where we looked at visiting Brazil, I had so many dreams, and I hope that those dreams will become fruitful someday. But in the meantime, and even after that would happen, it is for us to every day continue to find the spaces for healing, the spaces for forgiveness, and the spaces where we can move together, remembering that we are, or I am, because we are. If I don't have you guys, then I really won't find joy in existence. So thank you. And I will pass it on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Nancy. It's very reflective, your words, and I think that this group, since I met you a few years ago during the Stanford event, it was very interesting the way we change our view of planetary health, our view about friendship, and how these two things connect to each other. To make it different, we have to go back, really to go back and see, for example, the origin of our foods. I will talk about my field and try to make connections and how important is the food and the food we consume. They came since long time ago and maybe came from traditional knowledgement of indigenous people or traditional communities or agriculture, small farmers, like Camila said. And so I think we need to go back and see some traditional knowledgements and share, and food is a great way to do this because it's totally related to nature and the origin of where this food came and what we are doing with our biodiversity or our diversity of acknowledgement and biomes or things like that. So I think that we need to talk. When I started, I went to the last meeting because of one project named Biodiversity for Food and Nutrition. And in that situation, we are trying to research and to approximate, to put together the traditional, the communities, and the research, the academic knowledgements, to bring to the population the importance of biodiversity for health of the planet and for health of the population, trying to avoid non-communicable diseases, trying to create solutions to bring these traditional foods to our daily, to our routine and our food on every day, and to implement different ingredients to our routine exactly, and way to reduce the number of obese people and to reduce the number of unnourished people, a really problem we have to face nowadays. So doing this with some friends, let's say that like that, and doing this and discussing this and planning researches and talking with the communities, I think is the best way to listen all the voices around the world in different instances, since the policy programs until the communities, is a great way to find solutions and to develop a lot of new pathways to this situation that we are living now. Following the idea of Nightingale and Laura, maybe we can have to listen more, stay together more, to see what we are doing and what we can do to make the things better. So I think that's it, and thank you to listen for me, and I think we're going to listen about Vedasta a little.
Vedast, are you there?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I would share with you about the different initiatives we've been working on, for which some of us are part of them. We've been working as CBP Community Biodiversity Partners, which is an intended organization aiming to advocate on indigenous rights on natural resources management. And yeah, well, our idea is that there are many more forest dependent communities all around the world, and these communities have long been excluded on natural resources based benefits. And these communities are contributes a large pollution to the world population, and we are thinking that if we put these communities behind, the nature and the human beings are both going to face irrevocable uncertainties, much more complicated than ever before. That's why we thought we need to put our effort together, military level experts together, and then we think what we could do. That's how this initiative, this idea raised. And more than that, there is another initiative or idea called a COP, which is African Planetary Partners for Health and Environment. And both initiatives, both ideas have been running in parallel, and so we are trying to get many more people from all around the world, from different domains, to join us, so that we can move together as much as possible to help these communities live their world, their natural world, better. So yeah, so linking that with my previous work, I've long been involved in nature conservation initiatives, particularly working with my NGO back home, which is called Ifatizo organization, which is a youth environmental NGO working on human sustainable capacity building in the domains of nature conservation, organic agriculture, and renewable energy. Yeah, there is a huge gap. In terms of reaching out to grassroots level actors for engagement. So that's why it is urgent to bring together all these grassroots level actors forest-dependent communities, and as well as any other marginalized community, so that we can think together, we can apply bottom-up approach instead of top-down, this kind of long-lasting top-down approach, where these communities have been excluded from taking part in the initiation as well as implementation process of any development initiative. So yeah, that's actually where we keep close eyes on to make sure that we are moving together as a united world, as yeah, towards a much more fairer community. Yeah, thank you. So
Thank you for that. Yeah, and thank you, Camilla, Laura, Nightingale, and Raquel as well. So we appreciate you listening, and now we are more than happy to do a virtual rearrangement of the chairs, such that if we were sitting in front and you in the audience, now we just want to rearrange the chairs so that we're in a circle. And what I want to do is invite anyone. I'm going to stand up just to try and practice health and not sit too long. So if anyone else wants to stand up, move around, get some blood flowing, now could be a good time. But just to share our ideas about our remaining approximately 43 minutes together, we would like to have a dialogue, a discussion in case any questions arose based on what was presented, or if especially those of you who joined after we had already begun speaking and haven't had a chance to introduce yourselves, we would like to start with that so that we all know each other. And then we want to have approximately 20 minutes in breakout rooms so that we can have more intimate connections and really get to know each other better with the relationships so that we can remain connected. So I want to just open up the floor, especially anyone who has joined and hasn't introduced yourself. Please go ahead and share with us who you are and what you're doing. And also anyone who would like to ask questions or share ideas, please feel free. So I'll call on or invite Sarah and David Utman, if you would like to share a little bit about who you are, and then Diana also. I know you just joined, but we really want to hear from everyone in our common space, if possible.
We're here, Nathan.
Can you just say, who you are and a little bit, please?
Okay. I am Sarah Utman, Nathan's mother, and this is my husband, David, Nathan's father.
Hello to all. We were late. We didn't get here at 1 o'clock, so I'm not sure what the subject or the goals of this session may be, but I'm going to pose this question to everyone. 50 years ago, I was somewhat an outsider. When I was at college, I was concerned about the global population back then when it was 3.56 billion people. My question to everyone now is, how can a finite natural resource base support a growing lifestyle demand for 7.8 billion people? I say growing on a per capita basis, the demands that each individual somewhat expects. in today's lifestyle. How are we going to address this natural demand base with finite reserves? I will stop with that.
Yes, Diana?
Hi, everyone. Video on. My name is Diana B. I am from Kenya. I am a member of the Planetary Health Eastern Africa Hub, and I'm also Planetary Health Kasambada. Yes, thank you.
If I remember right, Roselli, we may not have heard from you and Guilherme. If you can just introduce yourselves, we'll appreciate.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? Yes, I'm Guilherme. I'm a family physician from Brazil. I'm interested in planetary health, especially because of my community where I work. I work in a place full of natural disasters and poverty. So I'm willing to change the place where I'm working at. That's why I'm here, and I'm really grateful to be here with you guys.
So Roselli, I'm not sure if the audio is working, but you can either unmute if you are willing and able to share, or else if you can put in the chat just so that we all know each other. And then I haven't tracked closely. Is there anyone else who hasn't introduced themselves yet?
I think that's Andrea not introduced herself too. Maybe the audios are not working. And I think that we have a very, very important thing to talk about here is that about how we're going to implement this question of your father, Nathan. So I think that we can, maybe each of us can see your impression, talk about your impression about that the population is growing, the diversity is getting worse and worse in our food and our forests, and so we really need to do something. I don't know which is the best way to return to the traditional ways of life and cultivation of food, or implementing technologies to the traditional farmers and traditional communities and indigenous populations to let them use their traditional knowledgements, but with some help to have this necessity, to attend the necessity we have presented to us.
And I'll just add my 2 cents of thought is just that I think, it's probably going to be a both and situation. Like we both need to harness the technology and innovation and test it out and see what serves us according to our values, not only just to function, but also according to our values. And then I think also a returning to some of the wisdom that maybe has been lost or hasn't been put into practice as much in the last 50 years, at least speaking for my country. So how do we take the best of all of those things? And I think that's why I really appreciated them opening the sessions yesterday with a conversation about values, because I feel like that is where we need to center ourselves. Is so much of culture today is just about productivity or even about innovation just for the sake of innovation. So really understanding what those values are that drive it, I think, is what can help to steer us in the right direction and pull from all pools of knowledge to serve our higher purposes together. And then another thought I have is just in terms of, because I work in nutrition space in the US, is just around education and to the extent that that is possible, human behavior change around the way we eat and the types of sourcing that we do, because of to the point that Mr. Utman was making, just the sheer demand for, if you just take meat products as an example or others, how can we shift that, and how can we get it more in alignment with a sustainable future? And I want to just encourage folks who are participating on the call, please feel free to jump in and bring your wisdom to the table.
Then I have this additional question, which my name's David Utman, Nathan Utman's father. This collective approach is very, I'll call it bold. The problem I see is there are not enough individuals willing to agree to a plan of attack, if you will, to address this global issue. There's still too much concern about me, myself, and I. And I just, the last 4 or 5 years, it's been about, we can fix it ourselves. We don't want to have any input from outside sources. We can make it alone on our own. And that will not work, that attitude, for a collective method necessary to address our global issue. I'll pass.
And John, I noticed you had unmuted yourself, so if you would like to come in, please do.
Yeah, I'm just trying to pick up on what. So I'm sort of thinking along this notion of pathways, and wondering through the pandemic how many people have, to sort of partly answer that question just asked there, is how many people have realized that they have gone too far along a certain pathway. But there's also that the question of other pathways people may want to take, but also we're sort of, particularly in the sort of global north, some of us, and as just pointed out, not all of us, are sort of trying to head back along that pathway to where we were before, to try and take the right fork in the path, at the same time asking others to not go along that path. And and sort of picking up on Nightingale's point, there's a sort of needs to be a lot of reflection and reflexivity about our position of power. And how we're actually sort of almost using that to try and there's a complex power relation there, in sort of, we're saying we're trying to head back, at the same time potentially stopping other people come along that path because we're saying that's the wrong path. So yeah, I was just sort of framing that question there almost. And so it's back to the previous point there of learning where that, it was Laura, I think, sort of yeah, where is that middle point? Where do the two paths of progress and not going too far back, such that we get it right?
I need to also think about what's said about we think just in ourselves, and we see that here. I'm gonna give an example that it's more visible to me, that we have just a few social participating on public policies, and it will be such important to have more of this, because that's the way we're gonna go far on this discussion, go far on this debate. So with people involved and learning, understanding why this need to be talked, why this need to be understood, and something need to be done about it. So I guess that a lot of it start in the beginning. Even there were start to study when they learn about how we can be critical. That's a long way to change, and we have just a few times. That's concerned me, because it's too much thing to change, and just a few times, because now we're talking about how we can change it, because we still have options to change and make things go in the right way again. But gonna be a time that the time gonna be run out and we cannot do anything more. So just a concern of mine.
Thank you, Guilherme, for the comment you just posted in the chats. I share that perspective that I don't think this is a time for being passive.
That's what I said.
Yeah, and it's a time to, I think, practice hope despite many things which we could fear and feel pessimistic about. I am not a historian by profession, but my read of history is that there's no perfect time. Every age, every period, every place has challenges, but to feel hopeful, to feel alive, it takes an active stance and connecting with others, as Guilherme is emphasizing, who think at a planetary scale, who think externally, not just narrowly short-term me, but instead about an ecological planetary framing, more about webs rather than vertical hierarchies, more about how we can all thrive rather than how can I get to the top no matter who suffers. And so I think even if there is going to be much pain, much suffering, much loss, much death, we, by coming together and at least talking about these things and saying that we are going to do something about them and actually believing that's maybe seen as radical or useless or hopeless, but from a health perspective, that is essential. To be healthy and well is to be connected and to think positively. And so that is really what we are hoping, is that others who share this perspective will come together not on a transactional basis, not because you can, in a short term, quantifiable way, benefit me, but instead based on that Ubuntu that's Nightingale referenced, that deep African concept of togetherness. And we actually have amazing opportunities, if we take advantage of them, to connect in spaces like this using technology, and not in a passive way where we feel entitled, but to really be grateful and to also pay attention to, we are far from where we need to be. As diverse as we may be, there are still many groups of people who are actively excluded because they don't have the privilege to be able to access that technology. So I think it's incumbent on us to recognize that privilege, that we are here on behalf of many others who don't have the opportunity to connect. And so that just raises the stakes somehow even higher, how much it matters for us to step up, for us to co-create and to have that hope that life needs to continue, and it's up to us to be a part of making that happen.
To request to
go ahead, Sarah.
A representative. Oh, sorry, Nightingale. To request to have a representative be part of the World Health Organization to represent all these feelings and ideas, is that a possibility?
I don't know enough about the WHO to speak to that. Does someone else on the call know whether the WHO has planetary health or One Health at the table already?
I think that they are talking about that, to have representation from different different groups of the society, but I'm not sure about that. But Sarah, I will get this information, and so we send to you this information as soon as possible, okay?
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I know there's something called the People's Health Movement, and they say that they are a much more diverse democratic space than things like the United Nations, the Security Council. A lot of these global structures of power are dated. They're post-Cold War. They are not at all open to people who want to step up and have their voices reflected. And so there's that dynamic tension in a world of limited resources where we have to learn how to share, and yet that will never be something that is static. It's always going to be dynamic and active. So people's health movements is something that's an interesting concept to explore. And I do know in the planetary health space, which is relatively young in this setting with the Planetary Health Alliance and the foundational documents that's led to the creation of this network. In the Lancets, there was a response to the call for the creation of a new field. And it was by representatives from the People's Health People's Health Movement. And they said, we're here, we'd like to work together. And so that's a challenge or an invitation that I would put out there to those of us who share that interest in democratic collective spaces, is that there are movements out there that are very much trying their best to reflect these same values. And I think bringing in that energy and that grassroots space is something that is highly complementary to the direction that planetary health, and indeed all different segments of health, we need to take those, because ultimately health is impossible on a planet that is dying.
I wanted to just pick up a thread from a couple minutes ago, what someone was sharing as well about what came up for me was the fact that, speaking about going on these paths and wanting to convince people to change who maybe don't want to or don't see it in their interest. I think, we all know we're up against the cultural values around economic achievement, getting more for yourself, getting more status, having more comfort, having more things. And I think one of the things that is maybe helpful or necessary, and maybe why COVID feels like a powerful moment to me, is because I think for a lot of us, that false promise was revealed. The fact that the physical things that we acquire are not what bring us happiness or meaning. And we all know it, but to really feel it through the COVID experience, I think I hold a lot of hope that for many people, they're recognizing that there's so much more power in the human connections and in relationship and the connection to nature. So I feel hopeful that this is a moment that we could capitalize on. And I think it's important in our messaging too, that we really get clear about articulating the cost of this paradigm for us as humans. Like, I'm going back to conversations yesterday about, the human exceptionalism, right? And part of why planetary health resonates or it holds hope for some change is because we're finally distilling this down to the cost to human health that our current practices have created. And I feel like even the health, I think we're building a huge body of evidence on the health side. I think the mental health conversation is really compelling too, because from an economic lens, we feel better if we get more stuff or we attain certain like the GDP type of facing indicators. But like listening to the folks yesterday speaking about the gross happiness product, I think that's what they call, out of Bhutan. Like, how do we reframe this so that we understand the cost to our own happiness that this is actually creating, and in that way frame it as an opportunity for everyone to actually ultimately feel better and be happier because we align ourselves to the values that we hold in a more meaningful way. That was maybe a long-winded long-winded thread, but that's where my mind went.
Thank you for sharing, Laura. I do have a question for John. John, would you like to expound a little bit more about the leadership to empower others and rather than empowering oneself, if you have more of where the
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I have done some work around looking at co-production, and also used techniques in the past with researchers, the sort of the voice-centered relational method, where you're looking at the theoretical perspective, you're looking at your reflexive self in the position of power you hold in the research position, and also the voice of the individual that you are researching, or the groups of individuals. But in the co-production and co-production of knowledge sort of approaches, you're really saying that we all have different knowledges to bring to the table, some of which is very professional, theoretical, policy based or whatever, and then there's also that sort of local level community knowledge that can inform how you apply that at the local level. But the comment there was more and I have to be very careful because I do work in local government and we are in a pre-election period, so I have to be very careful not to be partisan. But basically, it's sort of saying that there seems to be many people that are in leadership positions, inverted commas, who are there to promote themselves. There are also those in leadership that are there to empower others. I think it's more of that, trying to, leaders being there to empower people and get people's voices heard. And I think that's particularly important, as Laura was saying, around the pandemic. We have seen that a lot of people whose voices are not normally heard are those that have suffered the most. And it's really now saying, as we look to, to recover, or the new normal, or whatever the current sort of paradigm is, basically, how do we involve everyone in what that new future looks like?
Thank you for sharing. So that takes me back a few steps, or a few years back, where I was involved in a team in Liberia, in West Africa, and there we were trying to have a community-led, community-driven One Health project, and that was very hard because the top officials who were promoting One Health, who were going to these meetings and who had all the theory, they had all the power and did not share much of the knowledge. It was almost like, where it's, how can I put it? It is where you involve the local communities, where you involve the community-based organizations. That did not happen. And so when you look at it on paper, there's a lot of good that happens. But when you go to the communities, you find that very little has happened, and the community, the problems within the community haven't changed at all. And so this is also, to some extent, looking at the imbalance that happens, even academically, between the different worlds. Like if you look at the global north and then look at the global south, and just looking to see how that can be shared. And it's not a very easy thing to do.
And based, Nightingale, in this previous experience, what are your feelings, or what are your ideas from now on in these questions of leadership and about giving empowerment for people who needs to be empowered? Do you have some feelings, some ideas to share with us?
you know, I think I have a few thoughts, but really, or even just a thought, it's just it's a complex question, and especially because there's so much power concentration in certain areas and so little power in other areas, even amongst the communities where we live in the various places. But I think, like Laura mentioned, and I think somebody else, is that knowledge is one way of getting there. But also in the current world where we live, it's much more than just the knowledge. So I was a part of a course that was hosted by a German organization, Klug, and it was a planetary health, what was it? No, climate and health project. And there was a lot of discussion there, and also seeing how much wealth the people educating the lecturers had. And one of the main questions that arose from the participants were, how can we, because it was a global community, how can we, because we're very interested in the work that you, the educators, are doing, how can we engage ourselves in our local places? Because some of the research was being done in, I mean, the research is done in all different places, and you have people standing up talking about what great things they're doing and what great things are happening. And they're really indeed great things, but also in a lot of ways unreachable unless you are connected one way or another. And so that's the shared knowledge, but sometimes it's also hard to reach to. So your question is a good one, but it's a hard one for me to fully answer. I think I would like to hear what anybody else has to share.
Yeah, thank you, Nightingale, for that, for such thoughts. Yeah, I think what we've long been struggling with is the lack of active engagement of all actors, of all actor groups that should be part of the thinking, the thinking and implementation process of any other initiative, because yeah, we often tend to be imperative. So maybe I think this we often promote this kind of elite culture, and then we left behind grassroots level actors, grassroots level communities, and then we say, okay, let's involve all relevant actors in particular initiatives, and then we involve them passively. And when it comes to the thinking, decision making and implementation, we still act imperatively. So and I think the one significant approach is to engage any actor as part of thinking process, yeah, so that we feel of the ownership, yeah, everybody takes responsibility and yeah, be the owner of the initiative in question. yeah, so that's my idea. Yeah, so.
Well, I think I'll say a little bit to what Badasti said, especially that part of ownership, that I think sometimes we do get lost even in the process of looking to see either how little we have or how much we have. We forget that we can all contribute something to the table in terms of even, you know, bringing positive change, and that we don't need a lot. So I do feel that because of the current trend of things, we fall on the side of thinking that more is better, whatever more might be. And so sometimes can fall into self-pity instead of thinking about what can I contribute to the table? How can I do it better? Because I know that it can get very hard, because there are those who are struggling even for simple things like food. And so it's harder to ask a hungry person to look outside in the community and see, does my community alone need cleaning? And what can I do, even as a person who hasn't had a lot of formal education, to organize my neighborhood to do a cleanup? But if you have the basic needs, you have a home, a place to live in, and you have food, you have shelter, and health is key, then you can initiate even as a child, because these are some of the things I've learned from children, is the children are very good at initiating these. They ask very important questions, but because we're adults and the children might ask the questions at a time when we're probably even focused on minor things that seem big for us as adults, we ignore the questions of children. But even children have such great ideas if we listen to them. So I just wanted to say the point of, we all have something to contribute and we can bring it to the table.
I think it's wonderful that we're all getting together and contributing and sharing our feelings. We don't want to be philosophical, but yet we want to not be running into the brick wall. We can't do this, we can't do this, bam, bam, run into it, run into it. We want to have a ladder and climb over the wall. We need to understand and figure out how to rise above the issues rather than being frustrated.
Thank you, everyone. We're not quite to closing time, but we're creeping towards the 90-minute mark. And so we really want to re-emphasize the idea that we want this to be a community that's welcoming. And so a question to pose to anyone who wants to come in the planetary health space, are you actively connected to a values-centered, intentionally friendly, welcoming, relational community? If you are, we would like to know about that, and we would like to connect with them. If you're not, then we would welcome you to help us co-create, to improve, to expand, to scale this space and this idea. Because as Sarah, you just shared, that wall is too high for any one of us alone to scale. I think we are the ladder. We can build the ladder together, but alone, that ladder will never come into being, and that wall will remain in front of us. As humanity, we know that the clock is ticking. That coverage is everywhere about all the problems that humans have brought about. And so if we're not together, then it's almost impossible to really feel sincere hope. But what we want to do is connect with others who share these values, and to ensure that for those children and for our fellow creatures in the circle of life, that we are not responsible for the exhaustion or the extinguishments of this precious gift that we all have of being alive.
Thank you, Nathan.
So the floor is open for anyone that would like to share anything with us before we close.
I'll just add a mention that in the chat, if you scroll up, you'll see that I posted an email address we created for the group, so that if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to engage in the future when we hold meetings, we'd love to add you. So just make sure you email there and I'll keep an eye on it and make sure you get looped in.
I'll just say thank you for the opportunity to listen to this, and to know that there are other people thinking about this across the planet, and that, yeah, we need to build a network.
Part of the hope comes from, sorry, Guillermo, I'll be quick, from knowing that there are others. And so this was an act of vulnerability for us to try and plan and open up this space, but we really do appreciate and value that you came, you listened, you shared, and you connected. And so we thank you for helping us to maintain that hope, and we're going to continue, hopefully together.
Oh, I want to say that I really appreciate all your thoughts and feelings here in this moment, and invite you that stayed with us until now to share your thoughts with us, to participate with us on this idea of sharing leadership between the people who really need to be in the leadership and play their voices and their roles. Thank you for this moment.
Like Laura mentioned, she spoke on behalf of Roberto because Roberto couldn't make it. And his hope is that we can still meet in person. And even though, you know, that by itself is a privilege, it is still something, there's a lot to be said for the person-to-person connections. And so what I can imagine virtually is just because of what connects us, that it is hope and care, and in a lot of ways, love, not only for self, but for others as well. I just ask us to imagine a virtual circle where we're all holding hands, just feeling thankful for just being and having this opportunity, and hoping that that might come to fruition at some point, at least amongst some of us.
It is a blessing to be able to connect with people from all around the world. It's a wonderful thing.
So we are at our designated cutoff time, and want to again appreciate everyone for staying with us till now. I will keep the room open so that we don't have a hard cutoff, and we're not going to kick anybody out. We're happy to keep talking and keep sharing, but just want to check and see if we want to do any kind of intentional time space gathering like you suggested, Nightingale. I'm not sure if we have anyone who has thoughts on some way for us to lean in and connect as much as possible.
I guess I can somewhat timidly suggest that the best we can do to hold hands is probably to show our hands, or whatever you would want to show, sort of like as close as possible to a handhold. And it comes on the screen. If you're not able, or you're not comfortable showing your screen, you can just think it and do it from wherever you are, and we will feel it.
So I'll say something. Abraham Lincoln, in the Civil War time for the United States, "We are not enemies, but friends. Though passion may have strained, it must not break the bonds of our affection. Surely the mystic chords of memory will swell when again touched, as surely they will be by the better angels of our nature." Thank you all.
Bye for now, and look forward to connection sometime.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.